In Diablo 2, there are few powerful builds that are more misunderstood, even by veterans, than the Blade Fury Assassin. This is because despite the skill just looking like a bladed take on Inferno, it instead involves and triggers a wide variety of mechanics which can either help or hinder the player that chooses to use the skill, often drastically reducing the potential damage if you misunderstand them. So today we're not only going to cover the build, but also address these misunderstandings as we go through our skill and gear choices, so this will be slightly longer than our normal build videos for that reason, but I'll still try to keep it to the point. That said, starting out we do need to get the most basic part of the build out of the way, and that is stats. Obviously we want enough strength for our gear, and to put the spare points into vitality. But on this build, I would almost always recommend investing the dexterity to get maximum block. The reason for this is because this is actually serving two purposes, since not only is this helping our survivability, but it is also going to greatly improve our chance to hit by boosting our base attack rating along the way, which, unlike other martial builds, can be a challenge for this character, even at higher levels. Now, as far as the skills go, those are relatively straightforward, since we'll obviously be investing in Blade Fury, which you will want to max out due to how the math works with the skill, since the damage listed here will be modified by off-weapon enhanced damage, like auras and armor, and the higher, the better. The other skill I consider fairly mandatory is Death Sentry. This gives us a bit more area of effect control on top of our shuriken machine gun. Maxing this out will give it enough range, usually to hit a full crowd, so that's what I'd recommend. You're relying on this mostly for that corpse explosion, but the lightning can help out in a pinch against tougher physical immunes, but I wouldn't rely solely on it. Now, the rest of our skills are more a personal preference style thing. For this build, I opted to lean into the Shadow Tree with Shadow Master for a strong traveling companion and mercenary protector, Venom for giving us fairly reasonable bits of non-physical damage in the form of poison, and then putting spare points into Fade to top off our resist and give us physical damage reduction, all while grabbing 1-point wonders like Mind Blast and Cloak of Shadows. Some alternative skill choices would be Shadow Warrior instead of Master to have another shuriken-wielding clone, though I find the Master more useful for distractions. The Warrior can pull off more damage. The other major alternative skill is more heavily investing in traps instead of Venom, so you could use Lightning Sentry and Death Sentry for more elemental damage. This may actually become more viable in version 2.4 as they're looking at reducing the synergy requirements on some traps, which may make this easier to achieve, but it may also just make it so that Death Sentry is not getting the lightning bonus. We don't know yet. That said, skills you want to avoid, as more than prerequisites at least, though, are Claw Mastery and Burst of Speed, since they will have little to no effect on your character with this build. Since Claw Mastery won't boost your attack rating with Blade Fury, even if you're using a Claw, and Blade Fury has a fixed attack rate regardless of attack speed, for better or worse, so you'd only be getting Run Walk from, well, Burst of Speed. Now, as far as equipment choices, there will be people who love these choices and people who hate them, but regardless of your personal preferences, remember three important factors. 1. This build loves attack modifiers like Crushing Blow, Bleed, and Deadly Strike. 2. It does not use up weapon durability to use Blade Fury, so go Ethereal if you can. And 3, chance to cast skills that trigger cooldowns will interrupt your Blade Fury, requiring you to use the slow wind-up for the first star again, instead of sustaining them at the higher rate of a sustained Blade Fury. That last one is why we are starting with the shield. The amount of times people go with Phoenix here because of the solid enhanced damage is painful, since as of 2.3, the Firestorm from Phoenix will interrupt your attack, drastically reducing your damage over time, especially against tougher enemies that you can't just take out in 2 shots. Now, before it's asked, the Infernal Torch Firestorm is a monster Firestorm, without a cooldown, so it's fine, unlike Phoenix. So instead of Phoenix, we go with Lance Guard for Deadly Strike, Hit Recovery, and Damage to Mana effects. This frees up a lot of options in our jewelry slot, since our weapon and boots, we approach 100% Deadly Strike easily at higher levels. What we want to free up those jewelry slots for, though, is attack rating. On this setup, I'm using Metal Grid and Dual Ravenfrost, mainly because I wanted the extra dexterity, resist, and elemental damage with attack rating. A much cheaper option though is using Angelic Amulet and Rings, which will provide a much larger attack rating boost if you need it, though without the perks on the side, meaning you will need to invest more into Fade for resists, and as far as Cannot Be Frozen, it's not mandatory for this build, but it's definitely nice to have for mobility, so do keep it in mind if you really want to be running around a lot. The last little investment for attack rating is actually Lava Gout Gloves for autocast of Enchant. An alternative is keeping a Demon Limb on your weapon swap to manually recast Enchant whenever it goes down. And if you go that route, gloves such as Laying of Hands for boosted damage to demons are nice, as are Still Rends for their off-weapon enhanced damage and Crushing Blow. Though with this setup I already have 100% Crushing Blow without them, so it would be redundant, so you'd just be getting the enhanced damage on. This Crushing Blow is mainly provided by 3 pieces of equipment. First, Gore Riders, along with some Deadly Strike and Bleed effects. Then Gyalme's Face with enhanced damage jewel in it, because extra damage is nice, but it also has that Crushing Blow and Deadly Strike on it. And our choice of weapon, an Ethereal Death Berserker Axe, which I should note is being used because I already had it for a Barbarian build. If you're looking for a base specific to this character for maximum damage, you'd actually get more damage out of an Ethereal Death Etten Axe, since attack speed does not influence this build. Though if you have enough Deadly Strike and Crushing Blow, any one-handed, high-damage weapon will work, as long as you follow the earlier rules for avoiding on-strike skills with cooldowns. You generally want to avoid two-handed weapons as well, since they will have a much higher penalty on your Fury, making the trade-off usually not worth it. The last slots we have are Armor and Belt, which we went with Fortitude on the Armor for the large enhanced damage percent obviously, which will amplify the damage provided by the Blade Fury skill, as well as our weapon, in addition to other useful mods like Resistances and Life. And we went with Credendum on the Belt for 15% resist all for some conviction protection just in case, and to guarantee we pass 75% on all our resists with Fade and Hell. Though there are plenty of other nice belt options if your resists are covered, I'd usually place String of Ears at the top for life leech and damage reduction, Thunder God's probably next for lightning absorb and damage, and then Arachnids as a fairly distant third for slow and plus skills. Verdungo's is not bad, but it doesn't provide much benefit to us outside of the damage reduction with the rest of our setup, so it gets beaten out by String for that use in particular. As far as charms go, plus traps is the main focus, that and attack rating. And if you need it, resists maybe. The charms for this build aren't terribly picky, but you do want to keep them in mind when choosing some of your more defensive gear options. The last thing to consider is Mercenary, since there's a couple paths. In this case, my attack rating and level were high enough that I'm gonna just use a Might Mercenary combined with Pride. We get up to some fairly decent damage output with this. If you're short on attack rating though, or you want to push a 90% or higher hit chance, then you might want to invest in a Blessed Aim Mercenary instead, with Pride if you can afford it of course. By going with the Blessed Aim setup, you also open yourself up to one of the other weapon options, and that is Last Wish on your character, though Mercenary Might will get a higher bonus if you can set up to use it. I generally recommend against the Holy Freeze Mercenary setup for the Fury Assassin, since Might and Blessed Aim provide way more useful options in almost every case. As far as the Mercenary Armor and Helmet, it's the same as usual, Leech and Resist. In this case, I use Vampire's Gaze and Fortitude, though there's plenty of flexibility here for cheaper or more expensive setups, or even more durable options such as Guardian Angel for the Mercenary if you aren't using a Shadow for support. Overall, this build is severely underestimated at its peak, and a lot of veteran players make regular mistakes when building their versions of it, when in reality, it is competitive with similarly equipped martial classes when built properly, and is able to pull off some pretty nasty damage as well thanks to the speed, range, and functionality of the attacks from Blade Fury.